So when I was going through my divorce, when I first decided we were getting divorced, I had no idea how to find a divorce attorney. There was nothing like Divorce Girl Smiling. And I don't even think there was Google yet. It was 2008 or 2007, actually. And I ended up getting a name from someone I knew, and I went in for the consultation, and I literally walked out of there crying because I could not see myself working with the divorce attorney. She was awful. And also, I didn't know what to ask. I didn't know what questions to ask. And I just sat there and listened to her while she told me how great she was, and she wasn't. And I ended up not going with her. And I think that when people are going through a divorce, they think, okay, I need a divorce attorney, which is true. And then they go to the consult and, like me, don't even really know what to ask. So I just want to take a few minutes and help you, if you're watching this, figure out what to ask in your initial consultation. And with me to talk about this is Joe Soffer and Amelia Lynn Warchal. They are attorneys at Klain Law Group based in Boca Raton, Florida, where I wish I was right now. Hi, Joe. Hi, Amelia.
Good morning,
Good
Jackie.
morning.
Thank you for doing this. I'm going to start with you, Amelia. Tell me, what are a couple of good questions for somebody to ask when they're in their initial consultation with their divorce attorney?
So there's the logistics of figuring everything out, and then there's the information that they're going to need to be able to give the attorney that they're consulting with. I think one of the biggest questions that a lot of people have and they should ask is, what's the process? Because so many people don't know, okay, when you start, somebody is going to have to file a petition or complaint, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. And then the other party is going to have to get served. And then these are the deadlines and the dates that start tripping. So I think that getting an understanding of what the process actually entails is very important because it's not something that happens immediately. And as you know, these process can drag out for a very long period of time, depending on what you're fighting over.
So if you've never been divorced, you have no idea what the process is. So you're right. You're going to say like, okay, how do we do this? Where do we start? But do you ever bring up mediation? Do you start with, okay, what is the process that you feel you want to use? And they'll probably say, well, I don't know. So do you bring up options?
So I
Well,
do. I mean, I tend to tell people when they come in that, like, look, my job is not to make this any harder on you, and it's not to make it any harder on the other side. And for some cases, I mean, I've had cases where we do pre-suit mediation. In Florida, at least, you're required to go to mediation at some point in the case. So it's always on the table down here. But even when I was practicing in Massachusetts, where you don't have that requirement, it's definitely something that we talk about and we push because at the end of the day, you're going to have, as the client, a lot more control over the outcome that you have if you're reaching an agreement as opposed to having a judge make a determination.
Joe, tell me what questions you think people should ask.
just adding to what Amelia has said as far as the process goes, right? I can't tell you how many times I have clients that come in and they don't realize that in order to get divorced, you have to go through a litigation. Now, you have to go to a court, you have to go to a judge. A judge has to make a decision, a judge has to sign off on it. I have had a lot of clients, a lot of potential clients come to me and say, well, why do we need to go to court if we all agree? Can't we just all agree on everything? I'm like, yes, we can all agree on something, but we have to write it all down. Both sides have to sign it, and then we have to submit it to a judge who has to approve it, and a judge has to ultimately sign a judgment of divorce. And a lot of clients don't understand that. So that's just kind of adding to the lack of knowledge that people have as far as the process goes. Other questions I would consider asking is experience, right? What type of experience do you have? How many cases have you been involved in, right? I would even throw out some of my facts of where the finances are, where the income is, where the assets are, children, who is the primary caretaker of the children. Those kinds of things to be able to tell me will guide me in where I would recommend you go. For example, great example, a lot of people don't realize that until there's actually the commencement of an action, the filing of a petition or a complaint, right? New York is a complaint, Florida is a petition. Until you file, any asset that you come into possession of, any dollar that you earn, with certain exceptions, is considered marital, right? It's a marital asset. So I usually tell a moneyed spouse when they come to me and tell me, these are my finances, this is what I have. If you're the moneyed spouse, my recommendation is to file something immediately. So you start with that cutoff date, because if not, every dollar that you're earning for until you file is a dollar that's 50% yours, 50% your spouse's in most cases. So that's also important, to be able to have your finances and ask questions about what I should do with these finances. And then I would guide them whether it's better to commence the action right away, maybe send a letter, recommend mediation, or something along those lines.
All right. Now, what I'm hearing from you, Joe, is that I'm talking about what questions people should ask, but you're saying that a good divorce attorney will ask you a lot of questions and be a good listener so that the attorney can know what the best process is for you, what you should be doing now. And so I want to just give you guys a plug. So Klain Law Group has been in existence for a long, long time, but more importantly, both Joe and Amelia. Joe has been practicing for 30 years. Amelia, I think you said like 15 or 20 years practicing. And
17.
so that's really important because these guys know how to ask good questions. So when you go into your consultation and you're figuring out who you want to hire as your divorce attorney and you're wondering, should I hire this person? What I'm hearing from you guys is the attorney asking me questions and writing all this stuff down so that they can give the best possible course of action. Okay, now the other thing I wanted to say is that, Joe, you were talking about how, you have to file this and then you're going to have this court date. The difference I want to tell people who are watching this, the difference between litigation and mediation. If you do mediation, I always make it sound like, oh, it's such a better process. It's so much easier. That is true, but you still have to go to court no matter what process you go through. The only difference is you're going to court a lot less. You're going there for the judge to just say, okay, you guys made a decision. You have my blessing. Here's the stamp. Versus, oh, you can't decide what your parenting schedule is? Well, I'm the judge and I'm going to decide for you. Am I correct on
Exactly.
that, Amelia?
Yes. And the other big thing to point out, people get scared when, they hear the word lawsuit, litigation, any of that. Even if somebody files, okay, because sometimes you're not the one who is filing, you get served and you have to respond to a petition or a complaint. It doesn't mean that the case is going to go to trial. And in point of fact, the reality is most of them don't. I mean,
95%, I think I heard, do not go to trial.
correct. So
Mhm.
just because you get served or just because you decide you're going to file to start a process, it doesn't mean that you're precluded from going to mediation. And again, like I said, in Florida, you're required to, and resolving the issues that you have, or at least narrowing them down so that you're not throwing everything in the kitchen sink in front of the judge. You may go in front of the judge and say, hey, we have these two issues. Can you help us out?
Okay, last question for Joe. Do you hear so often two of the most common questions? How much is this going to cost and how long is this going to take? People think it's like Siri. You can just say, hey, Siri, give me a divorce, and you're divorced in 10 minutes because they want it now. What do you say to those questions?
Right. So, most firms, ours included, we tell them what the retainer is, right? We have a retainer amount that we ask for up front. We have an hourly rate. So we charge by the hour. We send an invoice or a bill every month on the first of the month, which is today. So it's the second of the month. First was a Sunday, but we're getting our bills out today, as a matter of fact. So every month they would get a bill showing all the work that's done, everything we've done on the case. We usually ask them to pay something a little bit ahead so that they're never running in the negative. But the answer to the question is, it is absolutely impossible for me to give you a final dollar amount. My answer is I will do everything in my power to try and keep the costs, the billing down to a minimum. And as much as many, and there are attorneys out there that do this, there are many people who say, I know you're going to bill me and you're going to drag it and you're going to want, and that's kind of like a philosophy that we have to kind of combat when we have clients that come in. But I tell them, quite honestly, that's not the way I operate. And the reason why I don't operate that way is because I would rather that you be a little bit unhappy with the final result, but know that I did everything in my power to keep your costs down. So you'll go out and tell your friend, your cousin, your mother, your grandmother, your mother's mother's mother, and they'll all tell them, listen, Joe was honest. He kept my billing down. He did a great job. That's what I'm looking for. That to me is worth so much more than trying to drag a case out, bill for everything that we do. It's just so much, it's just much more worth it. As
Joe,
far
I
as
love
how,
that about you. I love hearing that. That's great because my personal experience was, and I had a good lawyer, and really I don't have anything bad to say about him, but I would get bills and they would just, it would be so much money that I would go to my mailbox. Back then it wasn't electronic, and I would freak and I would just
Mhm.
cry and the stress. But really, it wasn't his fault. It was my fault for not mediating and going right to the litigation, because the more you litigate, the higher your bills are. If you mediate, you're not
absolutely.
going to have these high attorney bills.
Right.
Well, that's what I was saying is it's not only mediate, but you have to realize, listen, I can either spend another $40,000-$50,000 on my attorney, or I can cut back on what I want by a few $1,000s and get my case done and move on with my life. And to me, especially going through a divorce, that was so much more worth it for me than to just drag the litigation out forever. And I do that from my own experience of what I went through when I had my divorce. And I think it works. And I wind up, my biggest form of business is referral business. I get people that come back. It's
Mhm.
very, very rare that I lose a client and I get them coming back with all their issues and things post judgment, because there are many post judgment issues, and all their friends and family, because they know that Joe did right by me. And that to me is very important.
I just love it, you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I want to tell everybody who's watching, if you're in the um, Palm Beach County, what are the other counties?
Broward and Miami-Dade and Port St. Lucie.
Broward and Miami-Dade, so South Florida. The name of the firm is Klain Law Group, kleinattorneys.com, Joe Soffer and Amelia Lynn Warchal. And you guys, thank you so much.
Can I just add one last thing just to let you know is
Please.
I'm still practicing in New York. And, we have a lot of New York residents down here. And people, in fact, I have a case now where they're a New York couple, but they have assets down here. One of the spouses moved down here. So I'm still practicing in New York. So I can handle cases. I'm flying up Wednesday night for cases I have at the end of the week. So I'm doing cases in New York, still admitted. All 5 boroughs of New York City, Long Island, Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, and Rockland County as well.
I'll
Love
jump
it.
on that train and say same thing for me in Massachusetts.
Okay, Massachusetts, New York, Florida. Okay, you guys, thank you so much. And thank you so much for watching, everyone.